Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Breaking Fast with me, Archbishop Jerome Lloyd of Selsey. And this, of course, is just an informal break in the day, just to check in with each other and check that we're still maintaining the course of our Lenten discipline. Now, of course, today is a feast day. It is the feast of Saint Matthias, apostle and martyr. He, of course, was the substitute apostle for Judas, that the other apostles elected, as recorded in Acts of the Apostles, which of course was read at Mass this morning. So today is it's still a day of abstinence, so still no meat today, but otherwise you can have slightly more than the traditional one meal on a fast day, and otherwise you can relax a little and have what's called an exaltative fast. So rather than a penitential fast, an exaltative fast. What's the difference? Well, a penitential fast obviously means fasting as a form of penance, as opposed to an exaltative fast, which means depriving oneself perhaps of something but doing so joyfully. That is essentially the difference. Now, today, of course, also is the first Wednesday in Lent, the first Wednesday in the first week of Lent, which means it is also Ember Wednesday. And Embertide, of course, appears 4 times in the liturgical year, and it's when the Church marks essentially the changing of the seasons. It was originally an observance of the Roman Empire, particularly of the pagans, of course, who naturally, as all peoples, were at one time reliant upon harvests and noticed the changes in seasons, and would ask the gods or God's blessing on the crops and on the harvest. So when the Church came to the ascendancy in the empire, this was one of those things that the Church adopted and readapted, and so traditionally, of course, the Church prays in a penitential vein for God's blessing to mark the change in season and to mark the change in crops and harvest, etc. So that's Ember Wednesday today, but which was also, though, a traditional time for ordinations. In some places it still is. Each of the Ember tides, in fact, at various times or other, was the preferred time of year for ordinations. Of course, Pentecost, less so now Advent, but Advent used to be the time. And of course now in Lent. And so the liturgy, particularly of Friday and Saturday of the first week of Lent, reflects this traditional time of ordinations. So this coming Saturday, of course, during the Ember Saturday liturgy, where there'll be a few more readings and a few more prayers than normal, this reflects, of course, that the liturgy originally would have been the Sunday liturgy and would have begun on Saturday evening, well, actually Saturday night, and go through into the early hours of Sunday morning to reach a climax with the celebration of the Eucharist at dawn. That stems way back when. But that does mean originally there wasn't a liturgy for this Saturday. So when the practice came generally of daily Mass, etc., the liturgy was adapted from Sunday for Saturday. To cut a long story short, this is why this weekend we will hear the Gospel of the Transfiguration twice, both on Saturday and on Sunday. But it's wholly apt, of course, and the reason for the Gospel of the Transfiguration is because of the transformative process that is the Sacrament of Holy Orders. Anyway, more of that nearer the time. So today is the Feast of St. Matthias. It is Ember Wednesday, in Lent, and that means that the stational church today in Rome, in the Eternal City, was at Santa Maria Maggiore, which St Mary Major, Major Basilica. It is at one time was the largest church dedicated to Our Lady in Christendom, i.e. in the world, and it's the oldest church dedicated to Our Lady in Rome, and indeed is one of the oldest and one of the first deliberately built churches in Rome. Some of you who perhaps are familiar with our series The Domestic Church on Monday evenings will know about the Domus Ecclesiae, the house churches, so that originally the earliest churches in Rome were people's villas, and the main meeting room of the villa was known as a basilica. Now, when the Christians started meeting, of course, they couldn't have public buildings, so they met in each other's homes. In Rome, of course, these would have been villas, and gradually, after Constantine, when the church was allowed to worship publicly, etc., many of those house churches, many of those villas were then rebuilt or redesigned or had built above them actual churches. Santa Maria Maggiore, on the other hand, is one of the is the earliest church in Rome that was built as a church from the off. So a lot of the older churches in Rome were originally, they are built above what were house churches. Santa Maria Maggiore is one of those was purpose built. So anyway, here's a little video about Santa Maria Maggiore.
First raised at the order of Pope Liberius in the mid-4th century, the Liberian Basilica was rebuilt by Pope Sixtus III shortly after the Council of Ephesus affirmed Mary's title as the Holy Theotokos, Mother of God, in 431 AD. Rededicated at that time to the Mother of God, St. Mary Major is the largest church in the world honoring God through Mary. Standing atop one of Rome's 7 hills, the Esquiline, it has survived many restorations without losing its character as an early Roman basilica. The statues accentuating the outline of the facade represent saintly popes, as well as St. Charles Borromeo and the Blessed Nicholas Albergati. Crowning the ensemble, as if hovering over from heaven above, are the Madonna and Child. Its interior retains 3 naves divided by colonnades in the style of Constantine's era. 5th century mosaics on its walls testify to its antiquity. The Patriarchal Basilica of St. Mary Major reigns as an authentic jewel in the crown of Roman churches. Its beautiful treasures are of inestimable value and represent the church's role as the cradle of Christian artistic civilization in Rome. The numerous chapels, from the most honored to the most humble, were constructed by popes, cardinals, and pious confraternities. The high altar was started by Ferdinando Fuga and later enriched by the genius of Giuseppe Valadier. Every column, painting, sculpture, and ornament of this basilica resonates with history and pious sentiment. In the crypt under the high altar lies the celebrated relic known as the Holy Crypt. A statue of Pope Pius IX kneeling before the ancient wooden pieces of the manger serves as an example to the faithful who come to see the first humble crypt of the Savior. Pius IX's devotion to the Holy Crypt led him to commission the crypt chapel, and his coat of arms is visible above the altar. The precious crystal urn trimmed in silver, through which the faithful can venerate the relic, was designed by Valadier. Special mention must also be made of the Marian icon called the Salus Populi Romani, which means salvation of the Roman people. Legend has it that the icon was created by Saint Luke the Evangelist and brought by Saint Helena in the 4th century to Rome, where it was credited with the miraculous delivery of the city from the plague in the 6th century.
So there we are. So as you can see, it is a beautiful church, the Basilica of St. Mary Major. So it's one of the 4 major papal basilicas, which together with St. Lawrence outside the walls are formally referred to as the 5 patriarchal basilicas of Rome, associated with the 5 ancient patriarchal sees of Christendom, otherwise known as the Pentarchy, meaning that each of those basilicas represents Jerusalem, Alexandria, Antioch, Rome, and New Rome, Constantinople. Now, a beautiful tradition with Santa Maria Maggiore is on the Feast of Our Lady of the Snows. Mention was made during the video of the Council of Ephesus in 451, where the Concilio Fathers acclaimed Our Lady as the God-bearer, as the Holy Theotokos. And that event coincided with a vision that was given to a noble patrician Roman couple in Rome, who had a vision of snow who had a vision of a church to be dedicated to Our Lady. They went to the Bishop of Rome. They explained this. They all experienced another night a similar vision, and in the morning there was on the Esquiline Hill, and this was in the middle of summer, there was snow, and in the snow was laid out, was mapped out, as it were, the blueprint for the church to be built in honour of Our Lady. So this has been a place of honour and veneration to the Blessed Mother for centuries. As again was mentioned there, St. Helena brought back from the Holy Land portions of the manger, or purported manger of our Lord, which are housed in that beautiful ornate reliquary underneath the high altar, which is why Santa Maria Maggiore is the stational church at Christmas, of course, too. So anyway, amazing stuff, fascinating stuff. Don't forget that you can read all about the stational churches every day in Lent by visiting www.brightonoratory.org, brightonoratory.org, where also is posted every day the propers for the day's Mass, so that you can follow Mass and watch Mass online at the same time. You may be wondering, oh, that would be a really useful link to have posted with the broadcasts, like the other links that are posted with the broadcasts. Yes, it would. But the trouble is, our Brighton Oratory website is so orthodox that it's too orthodox for Facebook to cope with it. So... and this actually happened long before the cancel culture of recent months. But I only discovered about 18 months ago, I think, that our blog posts from the website were no longer appearing on the Facebook page. And that's apparently because we're so orthodox, we're too orthodox for Facebook, the content of the website, and so they refuse to publish anything from the website. I did actually write to them 2 or 3 times to ask, what's the problem, what content is problematic, and had no response, nada, nothing. So That's why the Brighton Oratory daily posts don't appear on our Facebook pages. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't yourself visit brightonoratory.org, and on the front page, on the home page of the website, straight away you will see today's Mass, today's stational church, etc. And you can also sign up to the website and have those posted to you in your email every day, which quite a few subscribers do. So that's that. Now, I'm not going to go on as long today as I did yesterday, don't fear, in part because I'm between meetings and I want to get try and get a phone call in before the next meeting. But I did want to read to you again a little more from Psychology Today, which I found very helpful our Lenten observance and about fasting. Now, again, this is an article about cravings. We shared yesterday the 4 tips that were given. I'll just remind you of those. First, limit access whenever possible. Just avoid temptation by by just not having things around. Use the 15-minute rule. Commit to not giving in for 15 minutes. See if the craving is still there 15 minutes later. If it is, try to wait another 15 minutes and see if the craving will pass. Number 3, stop and reflect before responding. In other words, ask myself what it is I'm about to do and why, and is doing this thing right now really going to serve some positive purpose for us as Christians? Is it going to help us grow in and deepen our relationship and communion with God or not? Or will I regret it later? And then fourthly, remember the biology. Now, this is what I want to share with you a bit more on. Now, what she actually writes here is, remember the biology. I remind myself that each time I eat chocolate, I just make the brain circuitry stronger and more intense, thereby ensuring that future cravings will be harder to resist. Now, I'm just gonna read to you a bit more. So here she's calls this "blame it on the brain." Now she is again talking about her chocolate addiction, but as I said yesterday, everything that she's talking about applies really can apply to all sorts of other things, any type of addiction, we might say, and any sort of addictive behavior. So she writes, the reason I struggle with my chocolate addiction isn't actually my fault. It's my brain's. Sort of. In truth, we are both culpable, but for different reasons. Here's why. Now, let me just stop there. We are both culpable for different reasons. That's a very good point. So there is our mind, and there is our body, and both have impulses that may or may not coincide, may or may not work in tandem. But it's important to understand the nature of ourselves and how we work. So here's why. Every time I eat chocolate, I teach my brain that this is an important action, something to pay attention to and replicate. If I do this once in a while, my brain will not really take notice and won't crave chocolate. However, if I repeat this action, even for just a few days in a row, my brain will begin to ramp up cravings for chocolate. As this happens, the refrain running wildly through my brain is chocolate, 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 and I experience this visceral urge to eat some chocolate now. What's worse, the more chocolate I eat, the more frequent and intense the cravings become. As time goes on, my brain begins making eating chocolate a priority, and I find that I'm craving it day and night. It seems pretty unfair. Enjoy a snack with any regularity and your brain takes over and makes you crave it all the more. Clearly, from an evolutionary sense, it makes sense why the brain would do this. Pleasurable things are prioritized because they keep us alive, and eating, of course, is no exception. It's an instinctual drive mediated by the hypothalamus and other parts of the brain. Darwin would be pleased at what my brain's doing, but I am not. From the standpoint of a woman trying to moderately enjoy some chocolate, it's a mean trick. But I love what she's saying there, because this is how we fall into the trap, as we were reflecting yesterday on habitual sins and vices and addictions. Because, we do something more than once, our brain sits up and takes notice. We do something regularly, and our brain begins to adopt that thing as a prioritized process. Also, too, of course, like with chocolate and perhaps other foods, and like with drugs and alcohol, you do it often enough, the body and the brain start to get start to crave it and expect it, so that when it isn't there, you suffer withdrawal. Now, I just find this, this is not rocket science. This wasn't new to me, and I'm sure it wasn't new to you. I just liked the way she kind of put things. And certainly for our fasting, it's good to know that aside from perhaps the paucity of our own will, part of the struggle too is because of regular behavior, regular activity that our brain and our bodies have been kind of trained into, and that's what we've got to break. That's what we're trying to break. So our fasting and abstinence is trying to break that cycle. It's trying to take back control, so that we're no longer being led by our bodies and by the routines that our brain has picked up and developed, but that we are taking back control of ourselves by exercising our higher intellect, thinking outside of the constraints and limitations of ourselves, recognizing that we have the ability to change and to make a change, and impose change on our bodies. Now remember that the whole purpose of Lent is to realize communion with God, which means realizing perfection. Perfection means realizing the happy equilibrium, balance, a wholeness, a restoredness about ourselves, which means our mind, our body, and our spirit. And so Lenten discipline is trying to effect that, trying to make that happen. So understanding how our brain works, understanding how our body works, understanding how we think and how we can think, these are all ways that should enable us to address the issues that we're facing. Now that's about all we've got time for now today. Tomorrow is going to be pretty tight as well, probably even tighter than this, as I've got literally 35 minutes between meetings for breaking fast tomorrow. But just to finish off by saying, tonight, the Daily Examen, we will continue a little bit further on our reflections last night about grace and the gifts of the Spirit. Yeah, cool. Okay. So next broadcast is Holy Hour tonight. It's Wednesday, so Holy Hour, 6 o'clock. Exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, adoration, reparation, recitation of the Rosary, and benediction. That's 6 till 7 p.m. on this channel tonight. And then later this evening at 10 o'clock will be the Daily Examen. So I do hope you will tune in and join with me, both in that act of worship and later in reflection. Otherwise, Mass tomorrow, of course, at 8:30. Take care. God bless. Look after yourselves, look after others, and remember, God loves you.